The housekeeping at the top, everybody, and then I'm going to hand it off to Jeremy. So thank you so much for participating in CXC 2020. My name is Jersey Drozd. I'm the interim executive director of CartoonCrossroadsColumbus.org. I hope everybody's been having a good time, enjoying all of the live stuff that's been happening, the pre-recorded stuff, and then also all of the action in the Discord. Got a little bit of housekeeping that I need to do at the top for this webinar that we're about to do, Creators Toolkit, which I'm very excited about because, you know, as somebody who grew up in a different time when we didn't have the internet, when I decided I want to be a comic book artist, I said, but how do I do that? And I had no idea. And so it's so awesome that these cartoonists today step up to say, hey, I'm going to share my experiences so you can navigate some of these things a little bit more effectively than maybe we did. Okay, so housekeeping. Let's do that real quick. Here we go. So once again, welcome to CXC 2020. You may have noticed you did not get charged for admission to watch this today, everybody. And that's because CXC is a 501(c) nonprofit organization that is largely funded by donations and sponsors. And I want to thank some of those sponsors right now: the Ohio Arts Council, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Columbus Foundation in White Castle, and Abel and Fiesel. Thank you so much to them for making this possible today. Here comes the housekeeping. This is a presentation followed by some Q&A, and you have been automatically muted by the host. That's me, and your video is off. And we're going to focus on the panelists today. And I should say this presentation is being recorded, and it is being simulcast to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch. You can watch it anywhere, and you can comment, you know, from anywhere. But like the real action is in the Zoom webinar. How, if you can't talk and we can't see you, how can you interact with us? Well, it's actually pretty simple. There is this chat box, this chat button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And you can use that to chat amongst yourselves as attendees. And you can also ask questions there, but everybody will see your question. If you want to ask something and you want a little bit more privacy, you can use the Q&A box here. And that launches a pop-up window that the people in the chat will not see. And you could even send your question anonymously. You type your questions and comments in the box, and then boom, pops up there. You will see your questions. You won't see anybody else's questions. Only the host will see the questions. And I'm about to hand over hosting to Jeremy Stoll, who is one of the co-organizers of CXC. So thank you once again, everybody, for showing up today and participating in this panel. And I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy right now.
Cool. Thank you, Jersey. So welcome to Creators Toolkit, Tips for a Comics Career. I'm mostly here just to sort of open things up and mention our sponsors. This is the first panel of the CXC LGBTQIA+, although technically it's the last one we're recording. The other two were pre-recorded. This is sponsored by Columbus College of Art and Design, the Comics and Narrative Practice and Illustration departments. And we've got some really awesome folks here today to talk to you about comics careers. And I'm going to hand things off to our moderator, Mel Gilman, but I will also be managing the Q&A portion later on, so you will see me later.
All right. Well, I will go ahead and kick things off. So welcome again, everyone. I'm Mel Gilman. I'm going to be the moderator, so I will be asking the hard-hitting questions tonight. I think how this is probably going to work is we'll probably, have a open discussion. I have some questions that I'm going to ask, and we'll go for probably about like 45 minutes, and then hopefully leave the last 10-15 minutes-ish for Q&A. So for folks in the audience, please do go ahead and submit questions when you have them. We will be so happy to take questions from the audience. But let's go ahead and dive in with a general question. I would love it if we could go around and give a very quick introduction to yourself, and also talk a little bit about like, what was your specific path for getting into publishing? Did you go to school? Did you not go to school? Did you start in self-publishing? Did you make the leap directly to traditional publishing? What was the circuitous path through the comics woods that led you to where you are today? And in terms of order, I'm just going to pull people randomly based off of the order you all are appearing in on my screen. Steens, let's start with you.
Great. So my name is Steens. I am a cartoonist and editor and professor. I teach cartooning at Webster University, and I'm the artist on the syndicated comic strip Heart of the City. I've also done graphic novels, including Archival Quality, and I have a new one coming out in 2023 called Side Quest, A Visual History of Tabletop Role-Playing Games. It is an adult history book about TTRPGs, where they came from, and it's also semi-memoir, as well as me and my co-creator, Sam Satin, talk about our connection to the tabletop role-playing industry. How did I start? My road was definitely wavy. I went to school for art, but I dropped out because it was expensive. Surprise. And so after I left, I started working at a bunch of different places, but I really started at Star Clipper, which was the local comic book store in my city. And after working there and being a manager there, everything that I did kind of led me to where I was. So I was working there. I was then doing librarianship, and then I ended up into editorial. So it's like every single thing that I did before helped me get a foot in the door at my very next job. And so now here I am, and I've kind of done a little bit of everything, which feels really cool. So yeah.
Awesome. Shing, let's have you go next.
Hi, my name is Xingyan Kaur, and I'm a cartoonist and installation artist. I mostly do autobiography work, although I've been doing a lot more fiction lately. I started doing comics mostly. How did I start doing comics? I have no real art background, either as an illustrator or as a cartoonist. Definitely no formal education in comics. I have a theater and English degree. And I kind of just meandered my way into comics because I like drawing and I like writing. And at some point, I just started making a lot of zines. And then I started doing a webcomic called Otherworld Science, and it was before I even knew how to draw people. So everyone is drawn as little beans. And I went to Comic-Cons. I just, it was mostly a social thing for me. Eventually a publisher approached me, and that's how I ended up doing my first graphic novel, which is a memoir about traveling all of Route 66 called The American Dream. And then I have a book coming out as well next year that's called The Legend of Monty Poe. That's a middle grade historical fiction novel that's focused on kind of the years around the Chinese Exclusion Act and Paul Bunyan. But anyway, my path was extremely strange. I'm still not entirely sure how I got here. So much of my work has essentially just been putting my feelings on the internet and putting whatever I'm doing at that point on the internet. And things just kind of took a life of their own.
Connie, let's have you go next.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. I'm Connie Giovannini, and I'm a comic artist from Chile, so I'm pretty far right now. I was hoping to see you all in person, but 2020, am I right? Well, I work right now making mostly webcomics, which is what I've done most of my comic making life, I guess. It's pretty much how I got there. Like finding webcomics, I'm talking like 2008-ish, 7-ish, around that, when I figure out like, oh, comics are something that everyone can make and put them online and people can read them. So I've been doing that for many years. One of my most recent ones was Postcards in Braille, which is a webcomic that I did from 2014 to 2017. Then got it kickstarted into a book. So that's my first book. And right now I'm doing a webcomic with Rodrigo Vargas, which is Walking to Do, which is autobio. Right now we're talking about quarantine, like pretty much what everyone is living right now. And we got into traditional publishing. I got contacted by HMH, and we're now doing a book with them, which is called The Do-Over. It's about three girls making their own hairstyling business. It's a lot of fun, and it's coming out in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So that's what I've been doing comic-wise. I did not go to art school because I didn't know you could study comics. I'm pretty sure you can't do it here. I actually went to college to study astronomy because I'm a person who does many things. Got a master's degree. I was gonna work in research. Figured out I didn't want to do research because it's a hard word out there, and they didn't like me making comics. So I was like, screw that. So I now work in science outreach. I work at the local planetarium doing outreach job and making comics. It's a good balance of things going on.
Yeah, that is an extremely good combo right there.
It's fun, especially now that I do everything at home.
All right, and last but not least, Nikki, if you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing and what your path is.
Yeah, so right now I'm just a freelance illustrator and comic artist. So a lot of my zines are autobiographical zines and perzines. So I kind of just make a bunch of things talking about being Puerto Rican and kind of like the political and social political situation in Puerto Rico, and just what it's like to like come into your queerness and like figure out who you are as an individual as you're growing up. And I also do a lot of like illustration work for kind of nonprofits. I'm also illustrating some books right now that'll be out sometime in the near future. Time is like very fluid right now. So that's been keeping me busy, and it's been a lot of fun. And I got into comics because I was finishing up my degree in animation at California College of the Arts and realized I didn't want to work in animation, like in the industry, and that I had no idea what I was doing. So I was like, okay, I'll keep going to school. And then I kind of just stumbled into realizing that my school also had an MFA in comics program. So I just kind of emailed the chair and asked, what does this mean? Got in right after I graduated and then started making comics. So it was really about 3 years now it's been that I've been making zines. And Mel was actually one of my teachers. So this is like nice to be on a panel with them. But yeah, it's like I started making comics there and figuring out kind of like, how do I put my own personal narrative into a tangible form? And just kind of started shopping it around different places. And that's kind of what's taken me around the country and would have also taken me out of the country until COVID happened. But yeah, that's it.
Excellent. So let's kick us off with our first big question of the day. And I'm going to kind of, I see that we got a Q&A question, so I'm going to kind of tie my question to this one. So the thing that I wanted to ask was that, a lot of cartoonists today, when we're first getting started, we tend to oftentimes start out doing more self-publishing, producing mini comics, zines, web comics, etc., before we take the leap into traditional publishing, if we want to get into traditional publishing. And I was curious to hear from folks who have done that themselves, who have dabbled in self-publishing, what like concrete practical advice you would have for people who are maybe thinking about going down that path and haven't done so very much before. And I'm going to tie this into a Q&A question, which is whether it's tweaking an algorithm or adding lots and lots of glitter, how can artists make their work stand out online? So if you have feedback on those topics, self-publishing, standing out online, things like that, go ahead and jump in. And I'll like open this up to the floor. Go ahead and jump in if you have comments you want to make.
Well, I mean, I'll go first. I actually don't like self-publishing. And I think it's because it takes up a lot of time. And I mean, I did it actually after I had my first graphic novel. So I started off doing mini comics and anthologies. So it was small press, but I didn't do any of the self-publishing. And that's kind of how I got my name out there, is by showing the comics works that I did in those anthologies. And from those anthologies and putting up my illustrations online, I end up with opportunities from people who will see my work and they're like, I want to work with you, And so with my first book, that mostly came from, you know, my friend Ivy reaching out to me to see if we wanted to do a webcomic together, and then deciding on a whim to, you know, send it to Oni Press to see, hey, you know, maybe they'll pick it up. Who knows? You know, what's the worst that could happen? And, you know, and then they picked it up, and we were like, cool. So now we have to draw a book. So I don't know. It feels more like I just started directly into how do I get my work published, you know, because I didn't have the setup to really do any sort of printing on my own. I had no money at all. And honestly, because I had, you know, still working in Tuos, everything that was digital was something that I was more drawn to. So it wasn't until after my first book came out and I moved over into freelance full-time where I decided, you know, let me give this a whirl. Let me try making a comic on my own, getting it printed, finding a printer, and like selling it at conventions. And I hated the entire process. So I probably won't make any more. Maybe I'll do a few more Encyclopedia Brown minis because those are really fun. But, you know, I think to give an answer to the question of like, you know, how do I really do it tangibly? It's really about focusing in on what it is that you want to do. You know, when I was in school, I didn't have that. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my teachers didn't really give me a lot of options either. So, you know, building a community and building a group of people around you that you can actually grow with, that's what helped me decide, you know, well, this is what I want to do. I want to get my comics in a book. So I'm going to apply for these anthologies. I'm going to keep making comics on my own digitally, put them out, and eventually I will get there. And eventually I got there.
I feel like the exact opposite about the differences between self-publishing and traditional publishing. I mean, and specifically the whole length of time thing, because my last book took 3 years to come out, from like turning in final pages to like actual hard copy, you know, that I could buy at a bookstore. And my next book will take like 18 months minimum from when I turned in my final pages. And the thing, and which is fine, it is a whole entirely different process and I appreciate it for what it is. But I am so fundamentally such like a control freak that likes having both control and knowledge about the process. And for me, like the fact that in self-publishing, I can think of something in the morning and have a zine by evening. I can have an edition of like 50 zines printed up by the evening. And it might not be good, but it's barely any time. And the sheer quantity of work that I can produce in fairly little time is just so wonderful for me. And you know, that said, I am a person with access to like a reliable printer. I make things a lot, so I have tons of paper. I mean, this stuff is like sitting on my desk right now, you know, like at arm's reach, I have enough stuff to make books. But I love the control of self-publishing. Like I like being able to pick out papers. I like stitching my books together. And it definitely, it's its own kind of pain in the ass. But I do think that that focus on handmade stuff is something that has been really amazing for my career, and including my traditional publishing career. Like I feel like my work has been able to stand out because I love traditional materials. Like I still paint in watercolor. When I exhibit at conventions, like all my zines are printed on like really nice nubby paper. And those things they're memorable. They're what people remember about my work. So I feel like when trying to establish your style and establish like yourself as an artist, the thing that you're going to be remembered for is always the stuff that other people aren't doing as much.
Yeah, well, hey, I feel like I've done like I've done self-publishing in various degrees. Like, for example, I did kickstart my first book, which was a really interesting process. I'm really impressed that I could that it was like something I could do basically on my own, like design the cover and have the print files ready and everything. So that part was fun. I enjoyed it a whole lot, and like choosing the paper and seeing the quotes and whatever. But the part that is out of my control is distribution. So for this Kickstarter, I actually have a very good friend of mine. I had some friends in the United States who would receive the books from me and ship them. So to me, it's easy to be like, oh yeah, Kickstarting was fun. I didn't touch any of the boxes with the books. I just sent the files and oh shit. Sorry. I just sent them flying and didn't have to worry about that. And then months later, I got my books in my hands and be like, oh, I made this. But I actually missed half of the work. So it's kind of, and then I had them send them to me at conventions. Well, to like the 3 conventions I've been in the up in the Northern Hemisphere. So that's been fun. And I just got into traditional publishing now, so I don't really know how that goes. It's like saying our book comes out in 2022 is like, what even is that? Like, it's so far away. But I like making scenes, like for local shows over here. That's been nice. I do like stapling things until the stapler goes bad, and then I hate stapling things. But yeah, I don't know what we're talking about. We were talking about making things stand out. Steens also mentioned having a group of people to grow with. I think that is super important. Like, cannot emphasize it enough important. Since I started out with webcomics, I actually had this group of people who were like just getting started making webcomics, and these little characters that we were like role play and stuff back in the day. And now I see them like making really cool stuff. Some of them get published, some have like these huge online stores, some are now working in animation. It's like, oh, it's the guys I grew up with. It's like my high school class, but with people I actually care about, which is even better. So that's been nice. And also I feel like at least me, and probably most of you too, got started in a time when the algorithm wasn't the mess that it is right now. Like, I don't know what I will say to people who are just getting started, because right now no one understands how it works. Like, things are not linear. You don't know if people who follow you are gonna see your stuff, and that's messed up. And I don't know what to do about it. I'm sorry.
So I'm not like too familiar with like the traditional publishing route just yet, at least in regards to like my own work. So I've just been doing a lot of self-publishing the past 3 years. And for me, it was kind of just always about trying to visualize the final product, because like I had all these different stories I wanted to tell, but trying to think about how I wanted the final thing to look like, because that really drove my desire for materials, and also just made me realize like, okay, I probably can't do this thing until I get the money from work to like buy all these supplies, or like go to a different printer because my printer is like on the fritz, like things like that. So just like trying to figure out kind of what message do I want to convey with the final physical product as I'm telling that story. And what's nice too is just like being able to work with your community and stuff, just because I was able, when I started making zines, I like started making zines in like the Bay Area, and there's like a really rich, robust like zine community there. And a lot of my friends were already in it. And I like somehow was blind to it for like 5 years of myself living there. And I was like, what the hell? So once I got into it, it was really great, because there's like all this inspiration. I got like so many tips on like how to print things and bind things and like materials. And there was this junk store called like Creative Reuse where you get a teacher's discount. So I like went there all the time and get recycled paper. So like all my zines were always different every time. So like every one zine was different from the one before it and the one after it. But also anytime I reprinted it, I would also like print it in a different color or something like that, or like mess with like the inks. So it was just like constantly an experimentation process, which was really enjoyable because I was constantly learning as I was doing something. So it wasn't as tedious as I kind of thought it would be. But it also gave people the chance to like see something new anytime I went to a zine fest, especially starting out. So that way they'd be like, oh, this is really cool and really different. This is like super colorful, or this is like in Spanish and not in English and things like that. So I really like the freedom of self-publishing just because I get to screw around with like everything, and some things don't work. Like sometimes I print something, I'm like, this looks like shit, but at least now I know not to use that paper for that reason and like use it for something else. Like, I don't know, it's like a giant art project, and like having taught zine making and just kind of like general illustration stuff to youth in Oakland and like now here in Colorado, it's just like I can kind of like pass that on to them because like kids are always making their own stuff and like their own comic books and things like that, and they want to know these things. Like sometimes they ask like really specific questions. I'm like, oh my god, I could like actually tell you this. Like I never thought you would ask me these things about zines. So yeah, it's just like really enriching.
Excellent. We've got a bunch of questions coming in the Q&A, so I'm going to try to go through some of these. One of them is connected to something we've been talking a little bit here. There's a question about networking. You know, what recommendations do you have for networking as a professional? How do you build your own community as a cartoonist? And I think especially one thing that might be useful, if you have any tips that are specific to the year of our Lord 2020 with everything that's going on here, this would be a great thing to hear from with you all. What are you doing for networking in this year?
Well, I have the opportunity to do a lot of great panels and meet a lot of great people on these panels, but that's definitely something that is done later down the line and not super early in your journey. But I find that a lot of like online groups helped a lot. I guess this is kind of dated, but I was really into like these Facebook groups. Like I don't even use Facebook anymore, but like I was in a Facebook group specifically for, marginalized gender cartoonists. And that was just like an incredible way to just meet a ton of people who, are all trying to do the same thing. So I would say right now, find the Discords that are a part of the things that you're interested in. And it doesn't have to be art related either, because a thing about networking is that networking can feel very sterile. And that's why you really have to think of it as building your community and like finding your team, and you find that not because of a shared interest in art, but a shared interest in other things, So I mean, I don't know. I think about all the people that, I'm close to and all the reasons why I like to hang out with them. And a part of it is because of their creative pursuits. But another thing is because I'm just like getting to know them and I like hanging out with them, like when I found out that like Shing was like obsessed with Paul Bunyan, I was like, this is amazing,
So cute.
So it's really about like getting to know each other, because once you have that friendship, it's a lot easier for you guys to talk about things that like matter even more, which is, the work and how to move forward and how to get better. And it's hard to ask those kinds of questions when you don't really know someone that well, So I recommend looking into some Discords. I don't know if I can really say Twitter right now because I don't know, my Twitter seems very much like 80% political right now and a lot less community building. So I don't know. I think it just depends on where technology goes, but I think Discord is the only one that is really pushing that a bit further right now.
Yeah. I was just gonna say like at least for me, like part of like what started me like networking with zines and comics was just trying to go to every zine fest that I could. When that was like a reality, especially in the Bay, there were like a lot in like random proximity to like Oakland and Berkeley and San Francisco. So through that, like I was able to meet a lot of people and just kind of like put my work out there and like just learn from everybody and like socialize and kind of understand like what this community is all about. And I think you could still like, it's starting to happen more in the virtual space, like at least through Instagram, like even though Instagram can be like a total shithole sometimes with the algorithm and whatnot, it's like everyone's trying to put these festivals that would have been happening right now online. So it's just like they're like featuring all these artists, and it's like just a way to go ahead and see all this different work that's happening out there that like maybe you can't meet them in person, but it's like you could still converse with them too. And like the more I got into doing zine festivals, I was not confident enough to like put myself out there to be like, oh, I'm going to be on a panel, or like I want to lead a workshop or anything like that. It wasn't until people started asking me to do things, I was like, oh, okay. Like I can do these things. So like after the first like couple of them, I started to like, yeah, put myself out there and try to talk about things that mattered to me. So whenever there were open pitches for like panels, like asking for topics, you could discuss specific things like subject matter you talk about in your zines that you're not seeing well reflected in other spaces. And I think that's a really way to go about it, because not only is that a way for you to discuss your passions and kind of like this open space, but also you get to speak with other people who understand your perspective and like build conversation. And like through being in panels like that, it's like that's how you build like all these different long lasting friendships. And that's kind of how my journey has been. And even doing like the virtual thing, I'm still able to have those opportunities like right now, and things that were happening with like Latino Comics Festival and like SoulCon, which is really great, because that was something that really worried me as we had to like recede into this little technological bubble for this year. Is just like, how are we going to continue these events, but seeing that there's so much more than events, they're like really community building efforts and things like that. And how do we grow relationships? Like, it's nice that we were able to find a way to like transform it through like all these video calls and whatnot. But yeah, it's really just trying, like once you have work that you feel confident in, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like you have to have like 5 zines or something like that, because you could just have like one really great zine and like everyone will like eat that up. But it's like once you have something you're confident in, just like find places to put that out there, whether it's like going to your nearby like bookstore or comic shop that picks up zines and like putting it up there, or just like finding different zine fests or like features online, like Pikes Peak Zine Fest is happening right now in Colorado, and they're like featuring different artists, and all you had to do is like find their little blurb on their post and just say like, I want to go ahead and like feature my work. And also like you could do zine trades. Like zine trades are also a really way to go about that. Just like mailing random people your zines and getting like random batches back. It's like really cute.
Yeah, these are great. They're always a fun time, like trading and stuff. To me, I think networking, like especially now, like in the before times, like DeviantArt, it was easy to like make friends with all these fun little guys just your age who are also having fun, and then we all grew up together. But in the past, I don't know, 8-10 years, I feel like networking in person is like, it's like super important, and it does way more than one would think. Like we go and put our work out there, and we put our work out there online, but I feel like my most networking, the most amount of people I've known have been traveling to North American conventions, which from here is kind of a lot, as in I will never break even, but it's been so worth it. Like every time I've been to SPX once, CXC once, and TCAF once. I once went there, but not exhibiting, so that's kind of 2 times. But each of those have been like so enriching, just knowing people and seeing that everyone has like this energy to be making things. It's not like showing stuff, but be like, wow, and like so excited about like what comics can be and everything. And you can be at a table like, how do you do, I don't know, like the texture on these grades? And it's like, oh, have you tried this in Photoshop and blah blah blah. And it's a really good energy. It also kind of gives me like, I don't know, like motivation to keep going, like, oh, okay, I'm on the right path, and these are really cool people. And so yeah, it's hard, but now I have like really high hopes that this year, despite being like absolute hell for everyone, will bring us some lessons in how to make these things more exclusive, especially for everyone who's like outside of North America. Like seeing the Ignatz Awards from here and seeing everyone in the comments was such a good moment of community. Like at first I was like, oh, bummer, but then I'm like, hey, I get to see it. Like we could do more of these things online, and we could all join them and see that we are a community that is spread very far apart, and leaving it only to physical events, even though they rule. It'd be good to have a more of a hybrid thing, so there's more space, like for everyone to get in, which is kind of the spirit of things like this. So yeah, I don't know what to do about networking right now. It's been fun. And also Discord, I installed it some time ago, never used it. But now I've been very active in the CXC Discord, and shout out to the CXC team for setting up the Discord, because it's been a ton of fun, like the impromptu live streams and people chatting around like from all backgrounds. And we're all trying to figure out this weird ranking system that they put that no one gets it. And we're all like, what's going on? And that's like some bonding moments right there. It's been a lot of fun. And I think we should do it more often after this.
Oh, I haven't gone. Sorry, I think everyone's kind of covered the how. So my feeling about it is probably more of a philosophical thing, because I am very just generally awkward and introverted, and I don't people well. So my kind of trick there in terms of networking or approaching people whose work I love is to just be like really honestly, genuinely enthusiastic about the things that I love and appreciate, because a lot of times it's someone else's work. And it turns out the moment after you tell someone how amazing their work is, and if you're being perfectly honest about it, you're probably gonna end up like at least acquaintances, because, you know, but I feel like just by being really enthusiastic about the things I love, like, you know, Paul Bunyan and trains and just all the stupid things, like I found that people are just drawn to that, even if it's not specifically art. Like this actually is a gift from Corey Bing, another web cartoonist who I met online, and I ended up hiring them to do construction work on a installation I was doing in Portland that ended up being a whole Paul Bunyan thing. And then their parents were cleaning out their house and found this vintage lumberjack. And so they sent it to me. I mean, you're gonna end up making connections in the strangest, most unexpected ways. So I would say kind of just be ready. Like, you don't even have to go searching, just be ready for friends to happen.
Another thing that I thought was really cool is when I first started doing syndicated comics, it's completely different from any other kinds of comics. But a couple of people who also do syndicated comics, so like Cul-de-sac and Phoebe Her Unicorn and Breaking Cat News, they're like, hey, do you want to like have a Zoom meeting and just talk about comics and being strip cartoonists? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so, you know, it wasn't even a thing where it was like literal networking. It was just that, you know, you're new to this, let's hang out, let's get to know each other, you know? And I think it would be good for people to not feel like they can't do that, you know? When I was moderating the marginalized gender and people of color Facebook group, one of the things that I really loved to do was to make like dinner meetups, and like we wouldn't talk about work. You know, one of the things that I like to do is be like, tell me something that you don't know, you don't think anyone would know about you know? And so I find out stuff from people every single time I go out to dinner with them, and sometimes you just need to break bread with someone to really, you know, get to know them better.
Gonna switch gears a little bit. Want to spend a little bit of time talking about traditional publication too. So one question, I'll frame it this way. So as cartoonists, we tend to be working as freelancers and as independent artists most often, and we're functioning in a comics landscape which doesn't have like a formal structural like industry-wide support system like a union or anything like that. So what practical advice do you have for, you know, freelancers, people who are going to be going after some of their first contracts, be it in, you know, freelance or traditional publication, for how do you, you know, protect yourself and advocate for yourself as a creator when you are functioning as an independent? What practical things would you advise people to do for protection and for advocating for their own work?
Don't lowball yourself. Like, know, like, be able to research and understand like what prices are for things you'll be doing and want to do. So that way, if you're ever approached to do something and you see a number and you're like, that doesn't track, like you could fight that. And like be confident in yourself, because as someone who like lowballed themselves a lot, like doing a lot of freelance for a few years before I started to like get more work and realize like, okay, I could definitely be earning more for the amount of work and time I'm spending on all these projects. It's really important, because it's like otherwise you just spend all this time being like exploited and burnt out. So like being able to understand like those rates, but also the amount of time they're giving you, because whether or not it's like kind of a one-off thing, like a friend of a friend is like, oh hey, I heard you do this thing, can you do this for a project? Or if it's something a little bit more formal where you do get something written out, it's like you want to make sure that the time it takes you to do something and the time they're giving you all makes sense, because no one's going to be able to do a graphic novel in 2 weeks. So don't have anyone tell you to do something like that, because that's stupid. Especially if you're not going to even be getting paid like a fair rate for like that amount of work. So it's like, one, do the research, like talk to your community, and like even just like Google things and like find all these different spaces where these questions have been answered, because that's totally how I figured it out. I would email Mel anytime I had a question about a job that came up. And things like that, just because like if you don't have a lot of exposure to it, it's very easy to kind of like run into a hole and find yourself being screwed out of something. But the more opportunities that come your way, it's just like you can't be afraid to just ask questions. Like there have been times where I'll get something and it's not even like sketchy, but it's just like, I have a question. Like I'll ask that question and get that clarification, suddenly feel a lot more comfortable. Like, oh yeah, I could totally do this job now. Just because you can't always fit everything in an email or like a voicemail. It's like, don't be afraid to ask for clarification. If there's something you don't understand or something that's not mentioned, is kind of like my big piece of advice that I've like learned over the years.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great answer.
Yeah, I'm like, word.
I mean, I was basically going to say something similar, you know, have confidence in yourself, because I don't think imposter syndrome ever goes away. If it does, that would be sick, because I'm tired of this. But, you know, think about the reason someone is asking you to do work for you. It's because they want you to do it. You know, so if someone's like, I want you to look over this pitch, it's not because you lucked into it. It's because they trust your opinion, you know? And it's the same thing when it comes to art as well. If someone wants you to do work for them, it's because they trust you to do it. So make sure that when you actually do it, you're like, great, this is the job that I'm doing for you, and I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and I know it's going to be good because obviously I'm good. I'm getting paid for it, aren't I?
Yeah.
Not to like give yourself that like extra Libra energy and be like, I'm the shit, until you believe it. So yeah, that's why I say confidence. You got to have it.
And I think that if you're going the traditional publishing route and are working in fields where agents are common, you should definitely get one of those.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it is the best thing for imposter syndrome for me, and my desire to not make people mad is having someone that just does that for me.
Yeah, and then also agents have this really cool thing where they want to work with you. You know, they're not just looking over your contracts because that's their job. You know, they want you to succeed, and they want to help you cultivate your career, you know? So while you may have them look over something and you know, negotiate for you, they're also going to talk to you and be like, okay, well, what do you want to do next? You know, or this is a really cool project that I thought you would be cool at. It's completely different than what you usually do, but maybe. So it's like having someone on your team is really, really nice. And always remember, you know, it's a collaborative effort, you know?
Mm. I agree with everyone. I'd like to highlight again, Nikki already said it, but being in contact with people, especially when it comes to like freelance work, you know, when there are like some publishers and people are like, don't work with these guys.
Yeah.
We all know who they are by now. So now I know if I get an offer from them, I'm going to be like, you know, so it's important to stay. And that's also part of being a community. Like if someone in your community gets ripped off and doesn't get their payments and doesn't get the royalties from X publisher, it's good that you know about it, so you don't have to have a bad time. And tell others if it happens to you, I guess, which I hope it doesn't.
Excellent. One related question to that, in terms of like practical stuff, in terms of like establishing your career as an artist, finding agents, anything like that, do you have any specific resources that you really love that you would love to plug while we've got a little bit of time left on the clock here, related to, you know, establishing your professional career as a cartoonist in this economy?
I would definitely, first of all, remember to invest in yourself. So if you need that Intuos tablet or whatever you need to get the work done, like focus on making that money so that you can get it, because it's going to save you so much more money in the long run. Or, you know, if you need to pay an editor to look over a pitch, put the money in, you know? So it's harder to say that if, you know, you don't have disposable income. But it is something to keep in mind, that sometimes you do have to invest in yourself. Also, if you're looking for an agent, I would recommend looking at Nikki Smith's website. She has a page on there just for literary agents that represent graphic novels, and it gets updated frequently. I believe the last time it was updated was August of 20, and it has a list of every or most literary agents that do represent comics and graphic novels. So that's a really good place to start if you're just starting your search for that.
I'm starting my search for that, so I took notes. Thank you so much.
I mean, also another thing, obviously, to, you know, use that list, that does help. Ask who represents the people that you are seeing or doing what you want to do, you know? So like if your homie is like killing it and they've got book after book after book, be like, yo, who represents you? Because they're doing their job. So, I mean, that's how I find out about new agents that I didn't know about before. Also, there's a website called Publishers Marketplace. You do have to pay for it, but there are things on that site that are free. So their job board is free. I believe you can still look at the new books that just recently got picked up, so that you can actually see who picked up those books, from what publisher, what editor picked them up, what agent brokered the deal. And all of that information is really valuable, because then you can see, oh, well, that's a book that is similar to the book that I want to make, so maybe I need to reach out to that agent.
Weirdly enough, like Twitter has been super helpful for me, but not in the sense of like the tweets, but just like I see a lot of my friends, or like just a lot of people have gotten into the norm of like putting their representation in their bios. And like it happens sometimes on Instagram too. And it's just like, it's really useful to just like discovering new names and like new publishing houses, and being able to see like, oh, this is the work that they do. Like maybe this is someone I could look at later whenever I feel ready to submit a pitch. So that way you can kind of like build your own like little repository for whenever you have the time to sit down and do all of that. And yeah, because then also like following them, you kind of learn about different pitch events that happen, or also just like you get to see the like blurbs that go out whenever something gets picked up, and like all the dates, and you get to see like the team and like what that team encompasses, so that we have an understanding of like what this process entails, because it's not like just you like on a ship by yourself. There's like a whole crew there like moving you along. So it's like, it's just a nice behind the scenes.
Yeah, speaking of behind the scenes, like if the career of someone that you're looking to emulate is someone that's not very online much, the acknowledgments section of their book is usually a really good look at who their agent is, who their publishers are, their art director, and you know, like the communities they run in. Like you can learn a lot from acknowledgments.
Yeah, and if they don't see their agent in the acknowledgments, that's sometimes a bad sign about that agent right there. So keep that in mind. Yeah. Every people in the chat are like, oh no, I forgot to my agent.
I know, I'm thinking about that now too. Like, I'm so sorry, Anjali.
All right. Here, I want to throw in another question from the chat here. What advice would you have for people who are interested in doing more traditional publishing and want to start pitching things?
So I would recommend finding an editor to help you with your pitch. I mean, I am biased because I'm an editor that helps people with their pitches, but it is super helpful. I mean, there's nowhere where it actually says what is included in a pitch packet, and that is crazy to me, you know? So find someone who has done it before, or an editor, and get the full list. What needs to actually be in this pitch so that you aren't left, you know, at a point where you send a pitch to an agent or an editor and they're just kind of like, sorry, this isn't what we want, when you could very well have a better chance if you knew exactly what needed to be in the pitch. I'll actually put a link in the chat. I give this to my clients all the time. It is a very detailed breakdown of everything you need to have in a graphic novel pitch. So I'll put it in there for you guys to use.
Yeah, I think nothing gets you better at the pitching process as just finishing pitches. Even if you don't think it's great, like just get the practice in. I decided I was going to learn how to get better at pitches by writing a new pitch every month. And
Wow.
it came to a quick stop because I was my first one, but that process of being like, all right, 1 week, I'm going to finish this pitch. And that actually got me better at writing pitches, the process of doing it. So yeah, write a pitch it. If it doesn't stick, well, you'll know that you need to continue writing them.
That is really cool. Just gotta say.
I mean, also jumping off of the process, just doing it makes you better at it, is the same thing for comics. It's the same thing for graphic novels, you know? Like my like skill leveled up by like 1,000 when I finished my first graphic novel. And I was just like, I don't think I would have gotten any better, or I don't think I would have gotten better quicker if I hadn't done a graphic novel. Also, you have to remember that if you wait and wait and wait until you think that you're ready, you're never going to be ready. So you just need to just jump in. Once you have the idea, just go for it. You know, you have the opportunity to either make that pitch, make that zine, make that webcomic. All of the opportunities are there for you. You just have to take that first plunge and not hold yourself back. Because there's a lot of things that can hold people back, and it should never be yourself.
Yeah, you should just accept that your masterpiece is not what's going to happen on your first try.
It's gonna take a while to get there.
That your first book is probably going to be fine. It's probably going to be just fine. But your fifth is probably going to be really good.
Your first several books are practice books, really.
Yes.
Practice one.
Here's another question from the chat. So this one's a little bit more on the creative side of things, but I would still love to hear answers from folks. How do you know that you're writing a story that people are going to want to read?
Oh, other people are usually really happy to tell you.
Yeah,
That's true. That's true.
Sorry. I mean, the answer is, how do I know? I don't. But I like working in public and putting stuff out, like just constantly. And so I work almost entirely from audience feedback. Whether it's, you know, my agent, whether it's like my editor being like, this idea isn't great, or even just like people on Twitter or people on Patreon, like you can tell when an idea resonates. So I would probably, I'm not a person that feels like weird about like the possibility of an idea being stolen, because I just don't think that ideas in and of themselves are all that interesting. It's all about execution. So yeah, I just let other people tell me.
Also, you never know what people are going to gravitate towards. You know, I saw a zine that was basically just talking about how sick it was. So they got this full-size rug for their living room for $35. And I'm like, that's amazing. What a deal, you know? And it's just like, what a random, obscure thing to make a zine about. But you'd be surprised how many people are also thinking, wow, yeah, that is a good deal.
I want to find that zine. That sounds so good.
Yeah, I want to know about it.
Yeah, so you never know. I did one where my my husband got the wrong toothpaste because they were out of the toothpaste we usually get, and it stressed me out a lot because I don't like change, and I'm really close to my toothpaste. And so I just did a comic about how I was trying to think, how do I get rid of this toothpaste? Do I tell him that I don't want to use it even though it's barely used? Is this a first world problem that I want to get rid of a perfectly good toothpaste? So yeah, and people loved it. So just put out what you like, and there will be someone out there that likes it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh no, you're fine.
Okay. So I feel like that reflects a lot in your work. Like when you can read a comic and tell the person had a great time doing it or has like a great time thinking about the topic they're talking about. And I feel like that's a lot. Like with my webcomic, Postcards in Braille, it started as a joke when I was visiting a friend. Like we started making we saw this weird dog at Hot Topic and we were like, oh, it's like a band, but they're bad, but it has like one fan. And it was like a stupid, like we joked about it during my whole trip. And it was like, I'm going to put it in my new webcomic. And so, like 4 years later, I was making a book with it. And a lot of people were really into it. Like it was just some silly joke, but I was so into it. I was so happy to write about it. It was like the most self-indulgent thing I've ever made. Like every page, it was like, I think this is funny. And a lot of people seem to resonate with it. So it's like, yeah, go do that crazy thing. Like, I want to do this crazy joke. And then I put it, and people are like, and they just enjoy it, and they can tell you had a great time doing it. And I see it in other comics as well. Sometimes they're about things I'm not normally interested in. Like, I don't know, I'm not a fan of high fantasy, but you can see when someone's like having the time of their lives and they make interesting comics. So that reflects a lot. Like rather than thinking what is something that people are gonna like, try to see what really sparks something in you and share more of that. Or we would all be making relatable comics where we lose our tablet pens. That's been done too many times. I've never lost my tablet pen, so I don't know how that feels like.
I literally just lost mine. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think, yeah, kind of like what Connie was saying, like you need to be genuine in the work you're doing. And kind of what's also always driven me in terms of like what I want to create is like the stuff that I never got to see that I was like really looking for. So like representation about yourself and like the different parts of yourself, or like things that just really interest you that you just can't seem to find anything about, but you're like, well, I love this, I'm just gonna like make the thing about it now. Yeah, it's just like letting your interests and your passions drive you and like being genuine with that, because it's true, you really do, you can see when people are like having the time of their lives making something or even just talking about it. And that right there is like already so enthralling when I like see someone who's like stoked out of their mind about like something super random that came up like on a tangent, and then suddenly I'm gonna like look into it later because I'm just so intrigued now.
Hell yeah. Okay, so we're about out of time here. So final question of the evening here. If folks want to check out your comics or follow you online, where should they go?
You can find me at ohaysteens on Twitter and Instagram. And I think that's it. I think I might be on Facebook still. But yeah, ohaysteens, that's OHEY Steens.
You can find me at shinkor.com, and I'm Sawdust Bear on Twitter and Instagram.
You could find me on my website, artofnikirodriguez.com, and also Art of Nikki Rodriguez on Instagram. On Twitter, like my handle was too long or something. It didn't work. So it's like just Tiff and Nikki, like both my names. But yeah, all my work's on all three of those.
Well, you can find me at Kuri Square. That's Kuri square as in the shape. I don't know how to spell in English. CurrySquare.com is my portfolio, at CurrySquare on Twitter and Instagram, and you can see our webcomic Walking to Do is walkingtodo.com, and there's links to everything from there. So I think that's the easiest URL to find.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everyone. It has been great getting to chat with you. Thank you to everyone in the audience. And for those of you who sent in questions, thank you for those. I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your CXC weekend here.
And I'm just going to plug real quick some additional programming. Thank you again to all of our panelists on this panel, but we're also going to have a talk with Spike Trotman through CCAD this evening at 7 o'clock. And then at 8 o'clock, Shingen Core and Karna Munir's talk is going to be streamed on professional oversharing with our last LGBTQIA+ program tomorrow on spooky and occult things. So keep an eye out. Thank you again, everybody, and have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.